Long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. And as always, welcome in my co-host of Big Play Sports, Jack McCurry. How you doing today, Jack?
Doing well, man. We are 3 days away from the start of training camp, and you're getting that itch now. Football is here, and it's about to be a fun time here in Cleveland.
Yes, it is definitely about to be a fun time, that's for sure. You mentioned last week that business is about to pick up, and that is definitely the case with training camp beginning on Thursday, just less than 3 days from now. I think we've all been waiting for this moment, ever since last season ended, even more so after the Odell Beckham trade. The good free agency period that the Browns had, another good draft. So it's going to be an exciting time, and here on this podcast we have more than enough to talk about. So we're going to jump right on into it with this week's edition of the Blitz. All right, Jack. It's been a while since we've heard this name, and as we kick off the Blitz here, I think we want to get this one out of the way relatively quickly. But today, Sashi Brown was hired by the Washington Wizards of the NBA as part of their restructured front office. He's kind of going to be doing what he did for the Browns before he was promoted to general manager, focusing on the analytical side of things. Are you surprised? Two questions. Are you surprised that he hasn't gotten another job in the NFL, and B, took a job in the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised that, Sashi went in another direction in the sports world, and to see that he is landed in Washington was definitely a shock. I think when you seen his name alongside their new general manager and, some of the other front office guys that they have, that, it was definitely shocking to see Sashi there. But, you talk about what he's doing there. He's the chief planning and operations officer, not only for the Wizards, but for the Washington Mystics and other forms of sports and entertainment in that collective group now known as Monumental Basketball. I'm happy for Sashi that, he took some time away after his roller coaster ride here with the Browns. But I'm glad that he's, got back into a new role, and I hope he succeeds. I think, and you've seen it today, a lot of people were knocking him once again for some of the decisions he made in Cleveland. But, when you look at this Browns rebuild, he played a big role in it. He laid the foundation down, and he left this organization with a ton of assets that John Dorsey has turned around and set us up for what could be an exciting time for the Cleveland Browns, the most exciting time in almost 30 years. So a lot of people want to knock Sashi, but I'm praising Sashi because he left the Browns in a good situation that's now turning into hopefully a great situation.
Yeah, he left them in a really good situation financially with the salary cap. Had all those extra draft picks that John Dorsey has done so far. Incredible job of capitalizing on and taking advantage of. For once, you could say that the Browns drafts have been much better, and that's due in part to Sashi and the capital that he provided for John Dorsey to go ahead and make those extra moves. This one we'll just kind of brush over really quickly, but Seahawks defensive tackle Jaron Reed was suspended for the first 6 games of 2019 for violation of the personal conduct policy. Redskins offensive tackle Trent Williams is not expected to report to training camp. He is holding out, looking for a new deal. Jack, is Trent Williams somebody that if John Dorsey wants to improve this offensive line? I know that's been kind of an area of concern. Is this the kind of deal that maybe John Dorsey can strike and land Trent Williams to be the starting left tackle for this team?
Oh, absolutely. The thing with Williams, he's one of the top offensive tackles, but he's had an injury concern. He hasn't played a full season in, I think it's 5 or 6 seasons. So you have to wonder about that. He's 31 years old. He's got 2 years left on his current deal, but he wants a new one. When you look at some of the other recent offensive line deals in free agency, Trent Brown with Oakland, Nate Solder with the Giants, like, he wants to get paid. He feels he deserves that. And, when he's on, he's one of the best tackles in the league. But unfortunately, like I said, the injury bug has gotten him. But it wouldn't shock me that if Hubbard or Greg Robinson struggle early in camp, that Dorsey goes out and makes a move. Obviously, and we'll talk about this in a minute, they've brought in several linemen today for workouts and ultimately signed one, but we all know Dorsey's not afraid to make a move if it's for the betterment of the Browns.
Speaking of those moves, the Browns signed undrafted center Lo Falemaka, who played college football at Utah. They signed him today as their 90th player on the roster, so you can almost call him Mr. Irrelevant of the Browns. He's behind quite a few players on that offensive line, and I'm not sure how much a real shot he's going to have, but training camp, you need bodies, and they decided to bring him in and give him a look. Browns also worked out several other free agents today. Running back Orleans Darkwa and offensive tackle, I'm going to butcher these 2 names. You told me how to pronounce them earlier, and I'm still going to butcher them. But
Cyrus Kwanjo and Ari Kwanjo.
Yes, they are brothers. The Browns brought them in today to give them a look. Jack, is your looking at some of these guys that they brought in, they ultimately decided on Lo Falemaka to fill out the roster. Just moves to bolster the training camp bodies, or is it something else?
I think it's just, they needed to add somebody. They brought in a group of guys to work out, and obviously they thought Falemaka was the best option. You look at the center position right now behind J.C. Tretter, they have Kyle Kalis, who's ultimately going to compete for right guard more than likely, and then Willie Wright, who is a undrafted free agent. So I feel like, they're looking for depth. Depth's always a good thing, especially in the offensive line, because injuries happen relatively quickly in the trenches. So, they're going to see what he's got here the first couple of days of camp, I would presume. And then, if they feel like they need to make a move or he impresses well enough, they keep him here and let him play in the preseason. I mean, this guy was an honorable Pac-12, all Pac-12. So he's got some credentials to his name, but I mean, this could be just another guy and who can get cut within the next week and we'll forget all about him. So I wouldn't buy too much into this right now, but we'll see how it goes.
When training camp comes around, they'll cut players every day, bring somebody else in, because obviously you have 31 other teams also making moves, and somebody comes available that John Dorsey wants. When you're the last 2, 3, 4 guys on the roster, you're in jeopardy of being in that kind of revolving door of players to fill out that training camp roster up until those final cutdowns. So, maybe if I'm Falemaka, I'm not buying a house. That's for sure. I'm definitely renting. Definitely renting.
Yeah, definitely. And then the one thing with real quick, bringing in the running back Darkwa, he missed all last year with an Achilles injury. I do find it very curious that they did bring in a running back to work out. We obviously know the situation with Duke Johnson and the fact that Kareem Hunt's out the first 8 games. So I would keep an eye on if they bring in running backs or sign a running back, if it's not a precursor to a potential Duke Johnson trade here in the next couple weeks.
All right, that is this week's version of the Blitz, and we'll be right back with the main content of our podcast. All right, heading into training camp, we have some major headlines and some major focal points that we'll focus on here, and there are some rather notable position battles that are going to be happening on this roster, and I think the most notable one is the right guard position. You have Austin Corbett, who was drafted last season by John Dorsey, who is probably the front runner for the job, but there are also other players such as Kyle Callis. I want to say his first name is Brian Witzman, who started 7 games for the Bears last season at right guard. He's a possibility at that spot. I know, offensive line is the most important position in protecting the quarterback, and in order to have a solid unit, these guys need to be on the same page. You saw kind of the disaster that rolled out with Desmond Harrison last year at left tackle. The way that Hugh managed that entire situation. Jack, when you're looking at this position battle, I think you could obviously say that it's the most important one on the Browns. Do you think that this one will be decided quickly, or is this one that come week 3 of the preseason that game is going to decide who is the starting right guard week 1?
Well, you hope it's going to be decided quickly, but, you go back to OTAs, Corbett was on the first team one day, then it was Callis, then I think Eric Kush was the starting guard another day. So this is a wide open competition. I wouldn't expect it to be decided quickly unless, right out the gate, Corbett or Callis, knock the other out of the park in terms of the competition. Corbett, obviously high second round pick last year. Like you said, this is a Dorsey guy. Many thought he could be a tackle. Now he's been kicked into guard. There's also been rumors that he could be the long-term center if they don't elect to re-sign Treader. So that's obviously something to watch. You hope he wins the competition, but Kyle Callis, he's been bounced around the league with a couple other teams. Now he's back in his home state, in his hometown with the Browns. And right now he's listed as the backup center, but, he made obviously an impression at the guard position to the point where there's some people suggesting that he could be the guy that ultimately wins this competition. So this one's definitely the biggest one to keep an eye on as training camp and the preseason get underway.
Where do you think Brian Witzman fits into this conversation? Because he did start for the Bears 7 games at that right guard spot last year. He played for the Chiefs when John Dorsey was there as well. So obviously Dorsey knows Witzman very well. How do you think he fits into this conversation?
Oh, I can see him being like the dark horse at this position, but I think right now he looks at it more as a depth piece, and then it's a guy that they can plug and play if an injury does occur. So Witzman's definitely going to be there. Those moves weren't really talked about enough in free agency. The signings of Witzman, Eric Kush, and Kendall Lamb, all these guys have started wherever they've been, whether, for Witzman it was Chicago, Kush was in Chicago and Kansas City, and then Lamb was the starting right tackle for Houston last year. So I think all 3 are locks, and they were some of the underrated free agent signings that the Browns did. Ultimately, when you get guys like Sheldon Richardson, acquiring Odell Beckham, and signing Kareem Hunt, those moves get overshadowed. But the depth on the offensive line is definitely better, but you still worry about obviously the right guard and the both tackle positions.
I'm going to go to one that's not on our show sheet that we kind of had prepared. I think one of the biggest ones one of the biggest position battles that is going to happen is the strong safety position. Obviously, they brought in Morgan Burnett on a free agency deal after he was cut by the Steelers. But I think this is a position that is extremely important, and I'm not sure if Morgan is going to be able to hold that one down. There isn't much behind them, so it's definitely his job to lose. But Jack, when you look at that free safety position, you have him, you have Jermaine Whitehead, who they brought in. Is this Burnett's spot to lose, and is it possible that maybe Whitehead could be the starter there?
No, I think right now Burnett's got the job, but I do expect Jermaine Whitehead to play a role big time in this defense. I think when we talked about the addition of Steve Wilkes as defensive coordinator, you talked about the possibility of having 3 safeties out there at a time. So right now you're looking at Demarius Randall, and then you got Burnett, you have Whitehead. We also got Eric Murray, who we picked up in the trade for Emmanuel Ogbah, and then we have Sheldrick Redwine, who was our 4th-round pick out of Miami. So right there's 5 safeties. Are they going to keep all 5 safeties? That's to be determined, but it won't shock me if they do, because I expect them to play a lot of defense, nickel defense, where you have 5 defensive backs. So you're going to have the 2 corners, obviously, with Ward, and whether it's Greedy or Mitchell, etc. And then you have, I think you're going to see a lot of 3 safety packages. So whoever starts, I don't think it matters. I think Burnett is going to get a lot of playing time, and I think Whitehead's going to get a lot of playing time.
Yeah, one of the other, you mentioned Greedy, that second cornerback spot. Are we expecting too much of Greedy Williams to come in here right away and hold down that other cornerback spot opposite Denzel Ward?
No, I don't think so at all. I think this is a guy that a lot of people expected to go in the middle to late first round. And, when he falls to the middle of the second round and the Browns ultimately made the move to move up, I think a lot of people thought right out of the gate that this guy could be a starter come week 1. Obviously, Terrence Mitchell played well last year when he was on the field. He obviously dealt with injuries, the broken forearm. So, and then you look at OTAs, Greedy was the number 2 corner. Now, I expect a full competition for that spot during training camp in the preseason, and I definitely expect Greedy to give everything out there. I think he's got a big chip on his shoulder because he realizes he lost a lot of money and by falling 20 to 30 spots in the draft order. So I think he's going to come in and play with that dog mentality, a lot like a Baker Mayfield, a lot like these other guys on the roster. And I expect Greedy to take that number 2 spot. Now, if he doesn't get it and they want to go with the veteran presence in Mitchell, I think that's just going to make Greedy fight harder. I would expect him to play in the nickel a lot, but ultimately I think he gets the better of that competition.
With the Browns on offense, there are a lot of positions, especially the skill positions that are locked in. Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Antonio Callaway, Rashard Higgins. But there are a handful of players that are behind those guys, like Damian Ratley, Derek Willis, trying to fill out those last couple of receiver spots. Who do you think has the leg up in filling those spots as we head into training camp?
Right now when I look at it, I would give it to guys like Damian Ratley and Derek Willis because they had the experience of playing in this offense. Ratley more or less than Willis because Willis missed the majority of last season with the broken collarbone. But I would give those guys a leg up. But you got to watch for Ishmaeli Hyman, who impressed during rookie minicamp and OTAs. Obviously, the feel-good story of Damon, Sheehy, Giuseppe. You got DJ Montgomery, you got Dorian Baker. You got a lot of depth at the receiver position. And, everybody's obviously focused on the top 4 right now with Beckham, Higgins, Landry, and Callaway. And then you also got to talk about Jalen Strong, who was another under-the-radar free agent signing by the Browns as he tries to reemerge his NFL career. So that's obviously one you're going to want to watch during camp because depth is always a big thing, especially at the wide receiver position because injuries definitely do happen. So I would give it to Ratley and Willis right now, but any one of these guys could make some noise once training camp in the preseason begins.
Yeah, I think Hyman has a really good opportunity here. He definitely impressed in rookie minicamp, and he's someone that I'm definitely keeping my eye on during training camp, during those preseason games, because the dude can flat out fly. And I'm very excited to see once you get him into game scenarios, how that translates onto the football field. And it should be an exciting time. And I think that he can certainly impress everybody and make this roster, as that fifth, sixth receiver. All right, let's get to the fun stuff, the conversation that everybody's been waiting for, and that is who is going to win the kicking battles. We have two of them. We have Greg Joseph, who was with the Browns last season. He's going up against Austin Seibert, who was a draft pick of the Browns this year. You also have Britton Colquitt going against the Scottish Hammer and Jamie Gillen. Jack, looking at these two kicking battles, we talked with Jake Trotter about both of these, and I think we kind of surprised him with the kicking question. But when you look at these two position battles, obviously with the struggles the Browns have had at kicker over the last couple seasons, it's a very important one. Who do you think has the leg up, pun intended, on this in this position battle?
At the kicker position, I'm giving it to Austin Seibert because he was ultimately the draft pick. And, while Greg Joseph had his highs, he definitely had his lows last year as a rookie. I've seen a stat today that we had the lowest extra point percentage in the National Football League. That's not good, even though, it's not a chip shot anymore. So I'm giving it to Seibert there. And then with punter, I'm going with experience. I'm going with Britton Colquitt. We need guys that have experienced the playoffs and experience like the taste of winning in the playoffs. And I think Colquitt's the only one. He won a Super Bowl with Denver. So I'm going to give it to him. Maybe Gillian slides onto the practice squad and, the Browns develop him as the long-term kicker or punter. So, I'm going with youth at the kicker position, and then I'm going with experience at the punter position. How about you?
I'm a big fan of punters talking trash. I think that's why I enjoyed listening to Pat McAfee, listening to his podcast and listening to some of the stuff that he puts out. And last year during the Denver game, I think I became a fan for life of Britton Colquitt when after the Jabril Peppers sack, he's just waving goodbye to the Denver fans on the sideline. And, anytime kickers talk trash, I'll become a huge fan of that. So I hope that he's able to win the job, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Scottish Hammer pulls this one out because the dude has a leg. Obviously, field position is extremely important. Thankfully, I don't think we'll be in a position to where we're punting as much as we have, over the last 10, 15 years. I don't think that'll be as much of a problem. So, it might not matter down the road. As far as kicker, yeah, I definitely will give the nod to Seibert and the being a draft pick. I think he has a good opportunity to win this battle. Hopefully, whoever does win the battle between him and Greg Joseph, that it's clear cut and you're not taking the better of two bad kickers. Hopefully that's not the case, and hopefully this year we don't have any kind of kicking woes because I can't go through what we went through last year with that incredible play in the New Orleans game of the 50-yard touchdown pass to tie the game from Tyrod Taylor to Antonio Callaway, ending up missing the extra point. Just other kicks. The Steelers game, the opening week, missing field goals in overtime. The one against Baltimore that barely went in for Greg Joseph. So I'm over dealing with kicking issues, and hopefully one of these two guys can eliminate all that fear from us. All right, as we wrap up this pod, did you have something else you wanted to interject there?
Oh, when you talk about like Colquitt running his mouth, I don't know if you've seen the Madden video where like they react to their ratings. Gillian was, talking about how Colquitt's like a beast in the weightlifting room. They put Colquitt's strength rating at like a 35, and he thought it was going to be in like the 60s. And he was like, he felt so insulted by that, and that just cracked me up about Colquitt. And I love his personality. He's a great fit on this roster for sure.
Absolutely. Like I said, I love kickers that talk trash, and he's definitely one that does the same. All right, as we wrap up here, we wanted to take a quick look at some of the I guess you could say underdogs to make this Browns roster. Jack, when you're looking at some of these guys, who would you say are the underdogs on this roster right now that maybe has a shot to make this team come week one?
Well, when you look at all the underdogs, I think the best feel-good story of the 2019 Browns, training camp preseason has been wide receiver Damon Sheehy Giuseppe. The wide receiver, if you haven't seen the story, go back on Browns.com. Nick Shook wrote a great story about him. A couple of weeks before the Browns signed him, he was homeless, sleeping outside, and he worked his way into a workout with the Browns, and the Browns were blown away with the dude's speed. He was a great kick returner at Phoenix College, which was a junior college, and I looking forward to seeing this kid on the field. The Browns' return game has been iffy, much like the kicking game it's been since we lost Josh Cribbs and Phil Dawson, and they've been trying to find guys to do this. I'm hoping that I'm calling him DSG. I'm hoping that this guy can impress everybody during training camp in the preseason, and he works his way onto the Browns roster. It would not just be the feel-good story of the Browns. It might be the feel-good story of the NFL as a whole to see this kid who was homeless almost 4 months ago, and if he could come in and be a great returner and, revive the Browns special teams game, which was good and was probably the best unit at times over the last 20 years on the Browns. If he can impress everybody enough, he is going to be the ultimate underdog in the dog pound.
Obviously, the Browns are going to need a backup quarterback. I know that's something that you don't really want to talk about, but you do have Drew Stanton. They brought in Garrett Gilbert. They have David Blau as well. Do you think that Garrett Gilbert could potentially win the backup quarterback role? Or do you think that he'll just eventually maybe be a practice squad guy down the road?
We talk about how people deserve second chances in the NFL a lot. And, sometimes it's with, off the field issues. You look at Garrett Gilbert, it was 6 months ago, he was tearing up the AAF. And then, unfortunately, that league shut down. And that league was being really successful. And he was one of the guys that was making it successful. He was more than likely going to be the MVP. He was battling, albeit former Browns running back Trent Richardson. And, now he's getting his second chance in the NFL. Was a highly touted recruit coming out of high school, went to Texas, and he went to, I think, SMU. And then he's bounced around a couple teams in the NFL. If he could come in and do what he did in the AAF and establish his role in this team as the backup quarterback, you got to feel really good. I don't personally feel that good if Drew Stanton has to come in a game, but not saying that I want to see Garrett Gilbert on the field. I kind of want to see him in the preseason just to see if he has anything to where he can be a solid backup. And then, hopefully we never have to see him in a regular season game, but I definitely think Gilbert has a good shot to be the backup quarterback.
The only way I want to see Drew Stanton in a game is when the Browns are up 40-0 on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and there is no more need to have Baker Mayfield on the field at that point. But knowing Baker Mayfield, he won't want to be taken out. But I think that's the only way I want to see some kind of backup quarterback in a game, in a regular season game for the Browns this year. Who are a couple Who are a couple other underdogs as we wrap up here that you have your eye on?
Our buddy Stephen Thomas had threw out a couple names, Willie Harvey, the linebacker out of Iowa State. The linebacker position is definitely one of the weaknesses on this Browns roster right now. And behind Joe Schobert and Christian Kirksey, there's a lot of unknown. We have a couple rookies, Mac Wilson and Sione Takitaki. But keep an eye on Willie Harvey. He was a beast at the linebacker position at Iowa State. And, while he's a little undersized, these guys, you get to know these guys during the preseason, and the guys that put everything out on the field. I would expect Willie Harvey to do just that. And then another guy at the safety position that's kind of crowded, JT Hassel out of Florida Atlantic. Another one of those guys definitely to watch during the preseason, fighting for those last roster spots. And who knows, we might see these guys hopefully slide onto the practice squad, and then who knows what will happen. We might see them at some point during the regular season, but those are some of the other names I'm going to keep an eye on during the preseason.
All right, Jack. As we wrap up this podcast, is there anything else that you want to discuss? If not, go ahead and plug everything you got going on.
As always, follow me on Twitter at jmccurrycle and check out bigplay.com for everything going on in the sports world. We have a great group of writers, including yours truly. Going to have a couple of things coming out this week, maybe something on the Browns, but stuff all across the NFL, NBA, and MLB landscape. Check it out at bigplay.com.
I think we're all excited that training camp is here. I'm excited to head down there on Thursday morning to check everything out. I know I'm looking forward to connecting with our buddy Jake Burns. I told Jake Trotter that I was going to seek him out. So there's a lot of people I want to say hello to when I get down there on Thursday, and I think it's going to be a very exciting time. I'll be sure to take plenty of pictures, post plenty of video over on the 1085 Gridiron account and on Facebook as well. I'll post some on my account at Anthony Joki, Joki. Be sure to follow all those accounts. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, just about any platform that you can think of. And as always, with training camp approaching, this is the most important thing that I can say to you, and that is, go Browns.